Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. I'm Michael Marchuk.
And I'm Brad Hairston.
And this is our weekly pulse check on automation and AI news. Of course, before we jump into it, all the links for the articles that we'll be covering today are in our show notes. So, Brad, we've got 4 articles today. Usually we do 3. Today we've got 4 on purpose because the first 3 of them play to the worst fears that everyone has with AI. And then the 4th one kind of redeems it. So
we'll call this the Luddite episode.
Yes, exactly. And I'm so glad you're the one answering all the questions to this here, because I want to see what you have to think about some of these things. So our first article today is from Computer World, and the article is titled "The Promise and Peril of Agentic AI." And the basics of this article go through how it differs from traditional AI, LLMs and whatnot, and what agents are doing. So can you kind of walk us through the article and then talk about some of the risks and that they had brought up at the end of it?
Yeah, so agentic is certainly the new buzzword of the day, and it's starting to come up more and more. It's pretty boisterous in terms of what it promises, right? So we've had large language models, we've had Gen AI. We're still trying to figure out how to incorporate that in our companies, and then agentic shows up, and now you have this AI capability, again taking advantage of large language models, but now it's fairly autonomous. It can set goals, it can reason, it can do dynamic planning, it understands context. So if things change, it can change its mind about how it approaches a task or what have you. I mean, all of that's pretty mind-blowing. And this article specifically refers to what Amazon has done. They've done this deal with the company Adept, which is in the agentic space. So they can license their technology. They brought some of their leaders into Amazon. So they're clearly trying to make some big strides here. My question is the world ready for agentic? I mean, there are too many companies that still are struggling to figure out how to just incorporate Gen AI, right? They're still trying to make sure they have the right use case, or they're still doing POCs. And you see a lot of articles coming out right now, studies and surveys that have been done that would suggest that whereas most companies went into this really, really quickly, they haven't quite hit their stride yet. They're still, looking at results. They're still trying to, be cautious about how they implement it. So I would just question whether agentic, not if it's capable of actually existing. I'm sure what Adept has come out with is pretty slick, and there's many other companies claiming they have agentic AI. I would just question whether we're ready for it. The other thing, Michael, just to throw in, is if it really is real and if it really can be put into play in companies today, it raises a whole nother slew of ethical challenges and governance issues. The article mentions this because now you have this agent that can self-determine, it can change its mind on how it approaches something, and it could go off the rails. It could do something unethical or something that might be deceptive in order to accomplish a task if it views that as the best way to do it. So you're going to have to put more constraints, more governance, and it just raises a whole nother, or it just creates a whole nother slew of risks that have to be mitigated.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that from a technology standpoint, we are going to eventually see this type of technology enter the mainstream. But as you point out, there's a couple things we've got to worry about first. One is the fact that many companies now are still struggling with the current technology that they're working on to be able to get to that point. Second, these are all very nascent technologies that are not necessarily fully baked yet. Mm-hmm. So while the concepts may be there to have these fully autonomous AIs, self-determining, et cetera, how to do things, the reality is we're not there yet. Although the pace of change is increasing as we've seen, we're not just not there yet. So I
Right.
think there's going to be a combination of the technological issues to get there, but also the adoption issues to get there, which maybe push this out a little bit longer than people have let on. So our second article today is from the BBC. It's being reported on MSN. The title is Klarna. AI lets us cut 1,000 jobs, but pay more. So the basics behind this one is that in the past year, Klarna, which is a financial services fintech company, has been able to go from 5,000 employees down to 3,800 employees through attrition. And during that time, AI has taken over the roles or the workload from those people who have left the company voluntarily. So that's one thing that's amazing by itself. But their announcement that they're looking to trim yet another 2,000 employees off of that list for more is amazing. So what are your thoughts of how this is coming, and in terms of both the news itself on its face value, but also in terms of what it sets in terms of a tone?
Look, they're a fintech. They're in a extremely competitive space. They have to find new ways each and every year to cut costs, to be more efficient. Kudos to them for leveraging technology to find ways to do that. And it's very likely that the things that they are using AI to do now are things that humans shouldn't be doing in their company, at least in their business. So I'm not going to criticize them for that. And it's also interesting to see that they say they're paying the employees that are left behind, they're paying them more. Although the article does say, of course, they're probably going to have more work on their plate, but I'm not so sure. I mean, if AI is doing what it's supposed to be doing, the workload in total should go down, which allows them to have fewer employees. So I think the author of this article clearly had a bias and clearly had a strong point of view that was negative toward technology. So I took all of this with a grain of salt, but they're like a lot of companies. They're applying technology. I'm sorry, Michael, say that again.
It does feed into the fears, though, for these companies, because this kind of article does say, look, we told you all along the Terminator scenario was coming, and here it is.
Here it is. Yeah. Well, if they put it this way, if they don't do things like this is not the only way to cut costs, but if they don't do things like this, they won't be around in a year or 2 or 3, because competition is stiff and technology is being leveraged so heavily in the payment sector, which they're in. They won't be able to compete. So this is keeping them alive. This is keeping their company in existence and allowing it to pay a lot of people and their families and what have you. So I'm taking a little bit of the opposite position here. But I think the article, used a lot of statistics to paint a very grim picture when, in essence, to me, it's the sign of progress.
And also the one part it doesn't really go into specifically is which kind of roles these were. If you've had, out of 5,000 people in 1 year, you have a 1,200 person natural, loss. So attrition. That seems to me that those roles may be less desirable roles, or roles that are prone to high attrition just in general. Right. And in those cases there, it would make sense that you're not really losing jobs as much as churning jobs within there. So the transition to reduce that and allow technology to take over may help, as they say, pay the people who are doing more high value work than these other jobs, which may have been much less valuable and obviously much more prone to churn. So let's see where that goes.
Yeah.
Our third article plays off of this. Again, it's sort of a theme here. We've seen agents, AI come on in, and with their amazing capabilities, Klarna saying, hey, we're using that to backfill the roles that are leaving by attrition. And this next article from phys.org, the article is How should the labor movement handle the challenges of AI and automation at work? And this particular article goes into the fact that there are plenty of jobs at risk for being automated. This is something we've heard for years now. As you look at all kinds of roles where robots, in both physical terms, in terms of the factories and whatnot, or in cases of software robots replacing or taking work away from humans within an office setting. And they're just saying that this is even a higher risk, again, going back to the same kind of fear mentality to kind of describe this. Now, they did use a bunch of statistics in this article also, but they also fine-tuned how they were describing it. So I'll let you give your commentary on this.
We'll let the gloom and doom continue for this article. And by the way, I think you chose this one because it features a professor from your alma mater, University of Illinois. Again, this is not new, right? We've been through industrial revolutions. We've been through technology revolutions. So when this article points at the labor movement, the unions and such, what did they do the last time? I mean, they've automated the plants, right? The take car manufacturing. Plants did not look like they do now 30 years ago. They didn't have the robotics and the level of automation that they have today. So they adjusted, they went through that. I'm sure there were jobs that were displaced and, jobs that had to be totally changed as a result of that. So this is just a new flavor of the same kind of revolution we've gone through multiple times. Now, the article also points to the fact that mostly the jobs being replaced are in the middle class. So I kind of question whether bringing the labor movement and unions and all that into this discussion, if that's, it sounds like it's two different things they're trying to blend together. I know that automation and AI will affect some unionized roles. I'm thinking about like taxi drivers in New York City when self-driving cars become pervasive. I mean, they're going to be impacted. But I think automation and AI, the intelligent automation that you and I do as a line of work, is primarily in the middle class, and it's in back office functions in finance and accounting and HR and things like that. It's not people doing the more physical labor jobs or other types of typical unionized work. But no doubt they will be impacted like everybody else will. I'm questioning why this is being treated as such a unique scenario when we've been through it multiple times. But I understand. I mean, when you see the numbers and you see the projections, and this article makes the projection that 47% of U.S. jobs could be automated within 2 decades. I mean, that's big, right? That's affecting almost all of us and people we know. But I look at the other side and I say, there's something on the other side of that. There's a new job or an entire category of work that doesn't even exist today that will be there. And so I think we're much more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. And I think we'll find ways to be successful in the aftermath.
And I think the other thing too is one part of this article that brought up that really helped me to solidify the foundation of where he was going with this. Is he started talking about state workers, and they do have unions within state governments. And within this particular state that he mentioned, he said that this could, in fact, 14 to 25% of the employed labor force within the state. Well,
right.
I don't know too many states or any governments for that matter that are designed for efficiency. And I've also seen, as we've seen the statistics, you and I both gone through this, that attracting labor to state work has become more and more difficult. So government jobs are difficult for them to fill, and they're seeing a large gap, especially in the large, like the U.S. government,
right?
Huge gap where they're reporting on this, where they're not going to have enough labor. So the fact that he's using that specific statistic to say that these number of jobs could be impacted is accurate, but I think it's misleading because they may not have people to do those roles and they have to find some other way of accomplishing them. So
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting way of, taking the fear bias and building it into a story. When in fact, there's other ways to be doing this. They could have used other kind of electronics to be able to say, well, we're going to do this digitally instead of via paper, and that's going to adjust how many truck drivers we need to drive paper around all our offices, and therefore this is terrible for truck drivers, right? The reality is, at the end of the day, it's best for the environment, it's best for the constituents, etc.
Right.
There's a lot of ways you can be looking at this. I think they chose to use a very negative bias for the article overall. So again, as we're all reading through all these articles, we try to take a balanced view on this because certainly I think jobs will be impacted, but I don't think it's always going to be negative.
Yeah.
And our final article today is from, I love the where this comes from. It's from AISnakeoil.com, and which I thought was a great website. The article is titled, AI companies are pivoting from creating gods to building products. Good. And the idea they're talking about here is that as you look at ChatGPT and a bunch of these other LLM companies who've gone on, they started building these very big models to be able to create a splash and to show what's capable and to extend their research. And in doing so, they've created a different kind of viewpoint of what AI is or could be, certainly leading towards that AI superpower thing, whatever they're looking for in the future. But the reality is that this is changing, and it's changing for a reason. So can you kind of explore what that was about in the article?
Yeah, the AI companies forgot the fact that most of us are not data scientists. We don't know how to navigate a large language model, natively. So it is funny the way this has evolved, and now they're more focused on products and actual applications of this very powerful capability. Many of the providers now, have a plethora of products on top of their large language models. And I'm thinking of the other day, hearing a presentation from Inflection. They have a whole architecture with products and such on top of their large language model that make it easier to put it to use and consume it. So, it's I think it's the right direction, and even if it's happened a little bit out of order, I think it's a natural one. The article does a good job of calling out some of the big limitations of large language models that companies are still going to need to address as they try to create products from the with the large language models as the foundation. They talked about cost, reliability, privacy, safety, user interface. So those challenges were there before. I think they're just exacerbated by the fact that now you're building a product that is taking advantage of the large language model. And so you really need to have the right approach. We see this a lot with our customers because they're looking to leverage Gen AI at scale within the context of business processes. And so that means our digital workers calling on Gen AI, feeding it information, getting output, taking that, acting on it in some way, and then typically going back and forth with Gen AI to create additional output. So there's, we understand probably better than most what it means to have to build a user interface and to interact with large language models in the right way and make it something that can be done at scale while mitigating all these challenges. So we're doing that. We're helping our customers figure out the right way to do it. And they are concerned about those things. They are top of mind for them, and they're not going to deploy anything on Gen AI that doesn't address privacy and reliability and those other concerns.
One thing I thought was interesting in the article was describing how the costs have come down so rapidly. We've all heard about the cost for training these large models, but for the operations, there was lots of discussion about how much energy it takes to run a query and do that type of work. And their article has described over the past 18 months has dropped by a factor of 100. So now it's 1/100th as expensive to do the same amount of capability that you did 18 months ago.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
with that kind of thing, they said that at some point, they are expecting that these access to the LLMs will be too cheap to meter, meaning that they're basically free. You'll be paying your monthly cost for access, and the actual number of requests you make won't even be metered because
Hmm.
it'll be inexpensive enough to operate. So that
Right.
takes away some of the barriers, but it also introduces, as you mentioned, some of the potential risks that we've seen companies struggle with, which is some of the governance capabilities and whatnot. Where we look at AI, we look at anything. Really, it's how do we make this safe and useful at the same time?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to constrain it too much, but you also don't want to give it too much rein because it, as you mentioned, it may go off the rails for specific reasons. It's trying to achieve its goal and hallucinate along the way because we're allowing it to do so and
Right.
being creative along those ways. That can
And
be
the
a
authors,
devastation.
yeah, the authors also used all of this to suggest that Gen AI is not going to completely transform businesses and society at quite the pace that we all expected. It could take up to a decade, in their opinion, because of these, these new things that need to be addressed and the productization, if you will, of Gen AI. So, kind of an interesting conclusion that they reach, and they definitely didn't like the fact that everyone thought that Gen AI was going to turn the world upside down so quickly. I think we've all been guilty of thinking that, but they make a good case that it's going to take a little bit longer now that companies are figuring out what it takes to really make this practical, really put it into production in the safest way.
So going back to our first three articles, how about AI ripping apart the world? Actually, we're not there yet. And while the AI may change the way our jobs are done and is changing the way our jobs are being done right now, the reality is that the pace of change is going to be governed the way that we adopt it and how we adopt it. And so it's a good thing people are still in control. So I appreciate all of that. Thank you for your insights today. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe and let us know what you're thinking of our content. We'd love to be able to produce more for you. And we always have really good guests every week as well. So listen in to our Transfer Now podcast, and we'll catch you next week.